You don't understand. That ship, it wasn't just cursed. It was alive. I saw things no one should ever see. We should have left the chest in the ocean, but we didn't. And now, it's too late.
Have you ever stared at the open sea and felt a gnawing unease? It's not the vastness or the isolation. It's the feeling that something ancient and malignant is lurking just beneath the waves. That's exactly what awaited the passengers of the MS Horizon Dawn, a luxury cruise ship that promised adventure, relaxation, and the trip of a lifetime. But for the 2,400 souls aboard, it became a nightmare none of them could escape. The voyage began like any other. The Horizon Dawn set sail from Miami under clear skies, its decks packed with excited passengers sipping cocktails and snapping selfies against the endless blue horizon. The ship boasted every amenity: a 5-star dining hall, infinity pools, spas, and even a small theater. It was paradise, floating on water. But 3 days into the journey, things began to change. It started with a storm, a sudden, violent tempest that rolled in from nowhere, shrouding the ship in darkness. The sea turned black, and waves rose like liquid mountains, crashing against the ship's hull with deafening force. The captain, an experienced sailor named Robert Kane, ordered everyone to their cabins as the crew struggled to keep the vessel steady. That's when they found it. The crew's discovery was first whispered about in the lower decks. Rumors of an old lifeboat drifting aimlessly in the storm, tangled in seaweed, its paint faded and its wooden frame cracked. But it wasn't the boat itself that sent shivers through the crew. It was the thing tied to it. An ancient chest, encrusted with barnacles and rust, its hinges corroded by salt and time. Against protocol, the crew hauled it aboard, dragging it into the cargo hold. No one noticed the dark liquid seeping from its base, or the faint, metallic stench that clung to the air. The storm passed, but the atmosphere aboard the Horizon Dawn grew tense. Passengers complained of nausea and headaches. Strange stains began appearing on the walls and floors, dark, sticky smears that the cleaning staff couldn't seem to scrub away. Then came the first disappearance. Laura McCree, a college student traveling with friends, never returned to her cabin after an evening at the ship's nightclub. Security combed the decks and public areas, but there was no sign of her. The cameras in the nightclub had glitched during her last known sighting, leaving no clues as to where she had gone. Her friends insisted she wouldn't have jumped overboard, but whispers of suicide began to spread among the passengers. By the next morning, 2 more people were missing. Fear turned to chaos on the 5th day. The first body was found in the pool, a man in his 40s, his skin gray and bloated, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. His limbs were twisted at impossible angles, and his eyes were clouded over with a milky film. The captain tried to calm the passengers, insisting it was a tragic accident, but the truth was spreading like wildfire. People began reporting strange sightings: a shadowy figure stalking the halls, whispers echoing in the empty dining room, and that stench growing stronger by the hour. That night, the first attack happened. It was in the theater during a late-night movie screening. A passenger, later identified as one of the missing, staggered into the room, soaking wet, his skin pale and peeling. His mouth gaped open unnaturally wide, emitting a guttural growl that sent chills down every spine. Before anyone could react, he lunged at a nearby woman, sinking his teeth into her neck. Panic erupted. People screamed and fled as the man tore through the crowd, his strength unnatural, his movements jerky and erratic. Security arrived, but bullets barely slowed him down. It took 3 officers tackling him to the ground, and a fire extinguisher to the skull to finally stop him. By dawn, the woman he'd bitten was dead, or so they thought. Her body was taken to the infirmary, but hours later, she too rose, her eyes glazed over, her jaw unhinged. The infection was spreading. The remaining passengers barricaded themselves in their cabins as the ship descended into chaos. The infected roamed the halls, their numbers growing with each passing hour. The once luxurious cruise ship now reeked of death, its pristine decks stained with blood. Captain Kane and a handful of crew members holed up in the bridge, desperately trying to call for help. But every distress signal they sent out was met with static. It was as if the Horizon Dawn had been swallowed by a void, cut off from the rest of the world. Below deck, a small group of survivors discovered the chest that had been brought aboard during the storm. Its lid was cracked open, and inside was something that defied explanation. A writhing mass of black tendrils, pulsing and alive. It seemed to sense their presence, reaching for them like a living nightmare. One of the crew members, overcome by terror, smashed the chest with a crowbar. That was their fatal mistake. The ship shook violently, as if the sea itself had turned against them. The infected grew more aggressive, their shrieks echoing through the halls. One by one, the survivors fell, their screams swallowed by the darkness. Days later, the Horizon Dawn was found adrift near Bermuda, silent and lifeless. A Coast Guard team boarded the ship, but what they found was beyond comprehension. The decks were deserted, yet the walls were covered in bloody handprints, and the air reeked of decay. The black tendrils had spread, crawling over every surface, pulsating as if the ship itself was alive. No bodies were recovered, but the chest was gone. Only one lifeboat was missing, its ropes cut, drifting back into the endless sea. The Horizon Dawn was towed back to port, but it was quickly deemed cursed. No one dared set foot on it again, and within months, it vanished, just like the lifeboat that had started it all. Some say the ship still drifts, its shadowy outline appearing on the horizon during storms. Others claim to hear faint whispers in the wind, calling out for help. But if you ever see a lifeboat, tangled in seaweed, floating aimlessly in the waves, turn back. Because some voyages aren't meant to be taken.